And good morning. Hope you're having a great Saturday morning. It is took me a while to get ready. Had to do some more prep and testing, but cheers. So, this morning I would like to share my journey doing a crash course learning in PowerShell and why I did that. The just random project Friday night, of course, who doesn't dive into a new PowerShell product on a Friday night? I know everyone does. And I just totally accidentally said, well, why don't I fully automate my Business Central Docker builds? Because that's what you're supposed to do on Friday nights, right? So, anyway, I'm just going to share that journey and share the result of that and see if that makes sense and if anyone else is interested. Okay, let's take a look here. What do we got? So, usual housekeeping. Although I stream on Periscope, YouTube, and Twitch, Periscope is very convenient. On Twitter, it's right there. Very good for mobile devices. But if you're interested in actually seeing what's going on, like the code samples I'm about to show and the text and the emails and output, basically anything on screen, you are much better off checking it out, even if it's later, if you want to actually see the details, checking it out on YouTube or Twitch. So my channels on YouTube and Twitch is just Steve Endo, one word, no spaces. So if you actually want to see the details, check it out there. And with that, so this is just my prototype. No idea what I'm doing. I I have never worked. I mean, I've used the nav container helper scripts in PowerShell, but I don't know anything about them. I barely know how to run them as before last night. And I also don't know anything about DevOps yet. It's definitely on my to-do list, which is a really, really long to-do list. But I'm totally new to PowerShell and DevOps. So, disclaimer. This was, as I mentioned, a completely unintentional, accidental Friday night project. I was doing one thing and I thought, well, why don't I add this little thing and try to figure out if I can do that? And that snowballed into what you're about to see. And it turned into kind of like an excuse and a challenge to learn PowerShell. I've been resisting learning PowerShell actively for years because I just have enough on my plate. I know enough languages and I have to deal with enough technologies in this Tower of Babel that we're dealing with constantly. And PowerShell is just one more thing that I didn't want to have to learn because, like, if I can avoid it, I have plenty else to do. But now that Business Central is the Business Central development and product development and the testing process is so dependent upon having Docker containers to automate and perform that process. Pretty much I know now I have to learn PowerShell in order to really support that process. So if you're reluctant to learn PowerShell, fight the good fight. I'm with you there, but I finally gave in and now I'm like, whatever. So it only took me a couple hours to kind of do the crash course. But I've done .NET development for years, done programming for years. So it's just another language and you have to fight the bizarre syntax and really weird choices they made in the PowerShell language and syntax that still make no sense to me. But whatever, it's like, okay, that's just the way they do it. And you Google it and figure it out and move on. Also, what I'm about to show you is not the way. I don't know what the way is or what the best practice is. This is just a way that I kind of cobbled together and maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. I don't know. Let me know. I'm open to any other better methods. If someone says that's terrible, that's going to be a mess, great. What is the right direction? Point me there. And you don't even have to tell me what to do. Just point me in the general direction and I'll start going that direction. Right now, I'm just kind of like, blindly poking around and trying not to hit anything. So that's my journey with that. Context. Why am I doing this? One, I'm lazy. So I hate having to remember to do stuff constantly as regular maintenance. It's the same routine over and over. I like automation. I really need automation. I've got 1,000 things going on. I just can't remember to do this thing, that thing. And if it has to be done regularly, it's even worse. If it has to be done consistently, that's the worst of all because I may do it, occasionally, but I won't do it consistently, regularly, and reliably. So I want to get rid of anything that requires me to remember to do stuff properly and on schedule. So I wrote a blog post. I had been realizing like, oh, I have an old version of Nav Container Helper. Let me update it. And I've said, oh, make sure you have the latest version. But it's so obvious. Like, why don't you just automate that? It's like, duh. And so it's not so much that it wasn't obvious, but I just hadn't taken the time. So finally, I was like, fine, let me do it. Let me just automate the script and have PowerShell, or excuse me, have Windows Task Scheduler call PowerShell and do that. And kind of the barrier was I'd never done that before. I'd never tried to automate PowerShell because, like I said, I don't use PowerShell. So I finally just did that. And I'm like, oh, okay, that actually works. It wasn't too hard. And it seems to be updating my Nav Container Helper. Great. So that was good. And based on that, I thought, if it's pretty easy to automate that, can I just automate my BC container build process? Because I don't like doing that either. It's been good that I've been doing it manually because I've learned, which was a necessary step. Doing it manually forced me to kind of get into the innards of Nav Container Helper, make the call, get the errors, figure out what parameters I was doing wrong. It forced me to kind of understand the new artifact process, what was going on in my machine. So, it's like walk before you run. It was good for me to do it manually. But now that I kind of think I have a small clue as to how that works, me doing that every day is just not a valuable task. So can I just automate this? And I know there are a dozen people out there saying, duh, of course you can automate it. We automate it all the time. We have this massive build pipeline. Yep, I'm sure there are people who do. I was just searching last night and I saw a few references to it, but I didn't see anyone explain how they did it. Maybe there's a blog post or a video out there. If it's not on the front page of Google, like I said, I'm lazy. I stopped searching. So if you have any other articles, videos, pointers on how to automate the BC container build process, throw them my way. I'm all ears. Okay, so that was my, slow brain thought process and why I'm here. So work is for suckers. I don't want to have to do a Business Central container build all the time. The versions of BC coming out for the Docker containers, it's just constant. It's like every day. Sometimes I'll do one build in the morning. I'll get one Business Central version. I'll do it again in the afternoon. I'll get a new Business Central version. It's coming out so rapidly that if you're looking to test with the latest version, it's just a constant maintenance process. So let's just get rid of it. And so this is a screenshot showing the email notifications that my automated script sends to me. And I just did email notifications for now because it's easy. It's like my poor man's version of logging. But the notifications I think are helpful. So if an error occurs, maybe I'll only send an email when there's an error. And if everything goes fine, I won't get an email. I don't know. I'll need to look at it. Maybe I will log to a database. Maybe I'll log to Azure App Insights. Maybe this is just all kind of trivial and really the place to be is in DevOps and that's where you want to be. But if I'm just an independent developer and I just need to have Docker containers, BC Docker containers on my dev machine, DevOps is probably overkill. I don't know that that's the role. I don't know. Maybe it is. But on my test dev machine where I'm just messing around, I just want it automated and I think this might work. So here we go. So fully automated with email notifications and full logging. And as you see in this screenshot here, this email tells me, hey, something doesn't look right here. You might want to check that out. And this, my arm's getting cut off. That right there is probably the one error that I recognize because I've encountered it multiple times now. And I think I've kind of figured out that if my OS build, my Windows Server 2019 build, which is those very last digits on the build number, if that does not match the generic host OS container or image that is being used for my Docker containers, maybe my version is really old and the only version available from the generic image repository is newer, or what just happened to me this week, a preview Windows update slipped into my server timeline or Windows update, and I didn't know it and I applied it. Well, that pushed me to build like 1369. Well, the generic OS container is currently available through the Docker nav container helper process. The latest is 1339. So I was ahead of the available OS builds, and that generated an error as well. It's like, oh, come on, you're kidding me. So it seems that that Docker build process is super sensitive, at least the nav container build process, let's say, is super sensitive to the OS build exactly matching the generic image. So I wrote in my script a check for that. It's very crude. I'm looking to improve it, but it's like, why not? Okay, moving on. So when I get the email, I want to have the full log attached. So if it says an error, even if it's a success, I want to see exactly what happened. And here you see a full, what's called a transcript from the PowerShell script. Every single thing that happened gets recorded in this transcript and gets attached to the email. So I don't have to go digging to figure out what happened. It's right there in the email. And again, this could be logged somewhere centrally. Maybe you have App Insights, Splunk, SQL, whatever your event logging tool is du jour. I want every single aspect of this. And this is how I design my projects with customers. They're usually small businesses. They need it simple. I send them emails to let them know either that there was an error, or if they want, they just get proactive notifications. I give them the highlights in the email, and if they want more information, they can check the detail log, which conveniently is attached. So zero effort on the part of the end users who are receiving this. Okay. So with that, if you know Johnny Karate, let's jump into it. And that's about the skill level that we're talking about here. So go easy. Okay, so let me find a button here. So here we are on my Docker server. And this is the physical machine. I need to do some testing on my VMs, figure out why they're so slow. But it's my physical machine, very fast, relatively. And this is the script that I came up with. So let me just run it first and you'll see what it does. So here I have my Docker containers and my Docker images. So I have a Docker container called test. Okay, just one. And I messed around and as a result of my testing, I have some containers. So here's an example where last night I was running it. I created named image test 1, build 14947. I tested this morning an hour ago, and we're already on build 1500. The Business Central developers, they are out of control. I don't know what they're feeding those people or how much caffeine they're giving them, but it is crazy how quickly these build numbers are incrementing and how often builds get pushed. So I may find that I need to dial this back, this automation process. Otherwise, I could have 3 images per day with different BC build numbers. But anyway, this is what it looks like right now. So I have this test. So I want to create a container called test, and I want to create a named image called test1. So this is just my thought that when I'm creating whatever container name I want that is a constantly rebuilt container, that why not just create a named image? And you can come up with a naming convention that works. This is just kind of me doing testing. Okay, but my container test already exists. Not a problem. This script will automatically remove that test container and recreate it. So that's the point of this. Just this container, whatever you call it, gets clobbered and rebuilt every single time the script is run, so you know that you have a fresh container. And obviously this wouldn't run in the middle of the day. You could do it on a scheduled basis. But let's just hit play. And you see it kicks off. And this incorporates something that really started this, elapsed time. So you see started build at 10 a.m., July 25th, 10 a.m., and it's doing its thing. Now, this named image, there's already a named image here, so this should be pretty quick. It should take less than a minute, but it's already creating this, deleted the old test container, creating the new test container, and this is nothing new, right? This is just calling new BC container, but I've wrapped this up with some configuration, with elapsed time tracking, and a little bit of error logging, and all that culminates in an email notification. So it's a minor enhancement relatively, but this versus just a call to new BC container, this I could wrap up as a Windows task and have it run, and it'll do my work for me. So you see that container OS, well, actually, elapsed time 44 seconds. So it completed, and there's my elapsed time measurement. I also record end time. Very cool. Here's my note. Container OS build 1339 matches host OS build 1339. And from personal experience, School of Hard Knocks, I know that that matters. I know I want to see that my Windows Server 1339 matches the container OS version. Just in the last week, if it's not matching, it will fail. So maybe that'll improve over time, but at the moment it's super sensitive to that. Transcript stopped. Output file is my TXT. Well, that's great, but I don't want to sit here watching this, so let's take a look and see what we did here. So I have this sending to just a junk email, that Gmail account that I've created. So you see 9:23, actually, where's my email? There it is, 10:01 a.m. It says, greetings, I have prepared your Business Central Docker container called test. Perfect. The build started at 10 a.m. It ended at 10:01:38, and the elapsed time is 44 seconds. Sounds pretty good. And good news, the container OS build matches the host OS build. Everything looks good. And the full log file is attached. So I can click here. I can see everything that just happened with that container build process. All of the PowerShell output is recorded in the transcript log. And that transcript log is on disk if I wanted to look at it. And I just did a date stamp on that. So each day will have a build, or if it's multiple times per day, it'll overwrite. And I can see what happened. It's like, okay, does that look good? Do I see any errors? Everything looks good. So pretty cool. So here's what happens. I simulated an error. So what I did is I changed the subject. So if something doesn't look right, in my script, I'll hopefully have some diagnostics and check for some conditions that I know can potentially cause problems, either a warning or an error. So I'm going to change the subject line, warning. Hey, you need to take a look at this. Cool. I prepared your BC container, warning. Container OS build does not match host OS build. And this was an earlier version, so I didn't include the build numbers. But let's just simulate that and see what happens. So I'm going to go down here with my little email, and let me just update this. Build does not match host OS build. Okay. And okay. So let me just save this, and I'm going to obviously I'm going to force it to fail. So I'm just going to put a invalid version number here and click play again. And this only takes about 45 seconds, so relatively easy to test. And how we doing? Okay, so it has created the container, starting things up. Now, obviously, if this failed, it wouldn't necessarily successfully create the container and it wouldn't be able to start it up, but this simulation. And so it completed, and you see I've kicked out this warning as an error. So I'm using the write error commandlet method, whatever you call it in PowerShell. And so I kick this out. Container OS build 1339 does not match host OS build A1339, which is my fake value. Still logs it. So now let's go over to my dummy email account. And you see warning. Just like I showed before, warning. Container OS build 1339 does not match the host OS build. So this is an error I've run into several times. So what I'm doing is I am parsing the transcript log, checking for the container OS version, having PowerShell independently get the host OS build, comparing those two strings, and if there's a mismatch, that's what triggers this warning. And so if you're aware of other things that may cause failures or common errors, you can check for those either in advance or after the build process succeeds or fails. So kind of neat. So given that, that was kind of what I'm looking at, and this appears to work. And so I'm going to put this in as a scheduled task. A few things I need to refine, but I hopefully won't have to deal with building my BC Docker containers going forward, and I'll know I always have the latest build available. And what I'll probably also do is clean up old images. So here I see I now have a container based off of the 15,000 build, and so maybe I'll figure out a way to clean up these older build numbers, or maybe I'll keep the latest two builds. I'm not quite sure. Once this automates it, these could really stack up quick, and these are a few gigabytes here. So, okay, so let's take a look at this PowerShell script. And this is my first PowerShell script. I've kind of gotten the nav container helper call to work, but otherwise I'd never written a script on my own. So this took quite a bit of Googling and copying and pasting the whole Stack Overflow development method. So here I'm just defining a few variables. What's the host name? And I could probably get this via PowerShell, so that would probably be a good improvement rather than hard coding it. Just have it look up the host name. And then, there we go. Let's improve the lighting. Then I say, well, what do I want my container called? Test, BC1, dev1, whatever you want to call it. And then I want to create an image based on that container name. So this will be test1 will be my named image. And I used my internal DNS server in the new BC container script. So I just made that a parameter so you could modify that. If you want to use Google 8888 or whatever, you can do that. And I'm generating the PowerShell transcript file name, essentially the log file. So put this wherever you want. I went with a date formatted prefix on the file name, and then the container name and the container build log. So here I can go and I see, where is it? Test, there it is. So July 25th, test container build log. And this is exactly what gets emailed as part of the that email that you saw. So that's saved on disk in case you do want to refer to it later. And I was originally trying to figure out, okay, how do I capture PowerShell activity, this log or whatever the output is when you look at this window. And there are different output streams and stream redirect and this bizarre PowerShell craziness. I was like, oh gosh, this is going to be painful. Then somehow I stumbled over this thing called a transcript. Lifesaver. It basically says, let me start a transcript. It logs everything, even stuff you do not see on screen as part of this activity, it logs. So if we go back here, I open this container build log. If I scroll down, I see this terminating error invoke command. So some of this stuff shows up in the transcript and you never see it on screen. So it's interesting. It's like recording some of the internal error handling or exception handling from new BC container. It's a little confusing, but kind of cool. So it captures everything. It's pretty nice. So we start at transcript and we just tell it, here's where I want my log file. Cool. I'm recording my start time, which is just for my elapsed time measurement. And I'm setting up variables to record a simple date and a date time. And I could probably use that up here. So I should probably move this up so that I can use that for my date format. Then I say, okay, how am I going to email this out? And this is my dummy email address, my Gmail address. I configure my SMTP server for Gmail. And strangely, one of the things that took me the longest to get working was how to send email from PowerShell. And it sounds like it should be really simple. In theory it is, but what makes it a little bit challenging, there are at least two ways to do this. There's a .NET method, which I didn't want to go because that relied on .NET. It wasn't native PowerShell as far as I could tell. So the native PowerShell method requires a credential. And it was a little tricky figuring out how to build this credential without having the email password hard-coded in my script here. And so what you have to do is, I've added a comment here, read host, blah, 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 and you output it to this secure string file, where it's kind of like some encrypted string file. And once you run this command, it prompts you for the password. You paste in your, in case of Gmail, your application-specific email password, which you have to specifically configure on Gmail. But if you have an SMTP password that works, you can use that. That saves it out to this file. And what you then have to do as part of the script is you have to read that file, and it stores it in this string, and you then use that to build a credential object. And getting that to work, like I understood what it was trying to do, but just the syntax was kind of funky. It took me 25 different tries, and that was the most difficult part about getting this to work. And then I just defined subject and body strings or variables for my email. And bizarre, PowerShell, of course, there must be 20 other conventions for new line and line breaks. No, PowerShell has to come up with something that no one else is doing. This tick N, a character that no one ever uses on the keyboard, they decide that to make that their escape character. So I had to figure out how to do line breaks and how to get that to work in variables and in output. So it was kind of tedious. So I'm just starting to log this stuff. I'm starting to build up my email body. I track whether an error has occurred. I track whether a warning has occurred. And I just write these out using write output. And apparently there's one called write host, and that's like bad, and the PowerShell police will come after you. So you're supposed to use write output, apparently. So lots of warning here. So here we go. We're ready to start. I remove the existing container if it exists. And maybe you want to do that, maybe you don't. Maybe you want to increment it 1. So test 1, test 2, test 3. I'm not sure. Still figuring this out to see what type of process makes sense with this. And then this is just the standard call to new BC, new BC container. These are most of the parameters. I moved a few up above just to push them up for earlier or easier reuse. But yeah, this is it. And new BC container, container name, credential, auth, DNS, update hosts. So that's your normal call. So I'm just writing a wrapper around this to help collect information. And what I did is put this in a try-catch block. So if my call to new BC container fails, or if there's an error, I want to be able to still continue. So initially, the catch block or the finally block, I use it to record the end time and elapsed time. So if it failed, even if it failed, I still wanted to know how long did it take to fail? And so, was there a download delay, and did it take 20 minutes, or did it fail after 30 seconds? Even though it failed, I still want to have elapsed time. So if it does fail, I catch it and I say, well, there was a problem, and apparently this is like the last error variable, and there's a whole error object and like a $ error object variable you can use to get the array of errors. I haven't looked into that, but for now, I'm just getting this, which I think is like the last error string. And I record that in the body of the email, and I set the flag that an error occurred. Now, I haven't been able to test this. Despite my experience, it's actually kind of hard to simulate a failure in Nav Container Helper. So I need to figure out how to do that and trigger that to just test this. But in concept, that should work. And then regardless of whether it succeeds or fails, I have a finally block. So regardless of what happens, I record the end time and I output that. Then I calculate my elapsed time and I output that. And then this is where I'm starting to add some validation. Okay, so the process completed, and whatever happened, success, failure, it's done. So let me try and put some minimal intelligence in this process to perhaps tell me what might have gone wrong or what potential problems I have. And so I tried some PowerShell parsing. So I am looking up the transcript file. I'm reading that because my process is essentially done at this point. So I'm reading that and I'm searching for the line that says container OS version. And I think that's the right line. I'm getting that, storing that in a string, the entire line. And then I say, well, let me parse that down. And this is super crude. There may be a better way to do this, to regex it, but I was lazy. It was late last night. This is a very, very low-tech crude parsing. So I do a substring and trim and length and split, and I finally whittle it down to the last 4 digits of the OS build, or the last segment of the OS build number. I get that for the container OS build. And then I use the PowerShell command to read from the registry to get the host OS build number. Now, the host OS build is, I believe, is also shown in the output. So I could potentially do that. Let's see. Yeah. So there's our host OS version. So I could get it here, but I don't need to parse this. This is right there. You just do .ubr. It gives you that one segment of the build. Super simple. So there's probably an easier way to do this, and maybe I'll refine that to make that more less fragile. So if my container build does not match my OS build, then I'm going to issue a warning, and there we go. Warning, container OS build does not match, and I write that as an error. So I kick that out to the error stream. If everything looks good, okay, everything looks good and matches. And then I stop my transcript, full log file attached, and I update my subject in case there was an error or a warning. And then I send the email, which took the longest. It looks really simple, but getting everything configured to work right was a little trickier, at least with Gmail. You need the authentication just right. So email from, email to, subject, body, attachment, server, credential, port, and use SSL. So in 136 lines, including white space, we have full logging, configurable parameters, full transcript logging, warning, rudimentary warning and error detection, and automatic emails. So I think this is a good start for my baby steps of trying to automate the BC build process. And I'm going to throw this into a scheduled task with Windows Task Scheduler, have it run at, 9 p.m., 6 a.m., whatever, see how it goes. I'll check out the emails and see what this looks like. And I'm going to do a blog post where I share this script, the current version at least. And so this will all be available. Nothing secret here. It's not anything special. I'm sure a dozen other people have done this, but I think it's kind of cool. It makes my life easier. I don't have to keep trying to build if I want a fresh version. And I think this will, hopefully I'll learn and figure out how to detect other errors or problems and refine that. And ultimately, the goal of this is to try and use this knowledge, whether this script or something else, in order to build an Azure DevOps pipeline that just fully automates this and takes care of the Docker build process. Because me running new BC container, low value, now that I kind of know how it works, let's just automate it, get it out of the way. And so, with that, thank you, Johnny Karate. To do. Is there a better method? Is there a better way to do this? I don't know. Is this what people are doing, just creating a PowerShell script? I'm assuming I'm reinventing the wheel, but if there is a different way, let me know. I'm all ears. One concern about this is reliability. It's not the most robust script at the moment. One syntax error, one problem, and this will break. So I don't know if there's a better way to architect this or maybe break it up so that it is more reliable, more fault tolerant. I suspect it'll probably work fine, but if there's a way to, improve parsing, improve error handling, things like that, I'm all ears. And then, like I said, integrating this with DevOps would be a next step. I just want to have this, totally hands off, and I only want to care about this if there's something I need to do to fix it or if a problem occurred. And with that, have an excellent Saturday. And let me know if you have any questions. You can find me on Twitter, on my blog, on YouTube, and on Twitch. So have a great weekend and enjoy. How do I get out of here?
Good morning, sun. How are you? Skies above. Gee, it's great to be